and this is the global workspace theory of consciousness. And I just want to ask, one, what it is both for me and for our listeners, and then why you prefer your model.
So global workspace theory, in essence, says, well, it's a theory of the human mind, and it might apply to other systems, but it was developed for humans. That in humans, you pay attention to stuff, and the things you pay attention to rise up and win a competition in your brain and become more processed. And some of that stuff eventually reaches a state where it's so enhanced, the signals are so enhanced that it can affect other systems around the brain in a widespread way. And that's called the global workspace. It's the collection of a small number of things at any one time that you're processing at high signal strength and great intensity. Sometimes it's has been called fame in the brain.
Dennett
called that fame in the brain, right? And so, but it's a limited number of things because we're surrounded by trillions of details, and at any one time, only a small number are reaching that, essentially the pyramid pinnacle of attention, the global workspace. From there, then it can affect other systems around the brain, like your speech and your decision making and your memory. And so that's a description of what is literally going on. I mean, that is apparently true in the brain. It's hard to argue with that, that a global workspace exists in that sense. It's probably more complicated than that, but that's a good general description of it. The global workspace theory of consciousness says when things get into your global workspace, that's when you have the experiential consciousness. That's what consciousness is. And so I always say of the global workspace theory that it's actually a very good theory, and it's wonderfully explanatory of everything, except as a theory of consciousness, it lacks one tiny little thing. It doesn't explain consciousness. It just says information gets in the magic box, and then the feeling is there. How? That's where the magicalism comes in, right? So that's the global workspace theory, and my particular concern with it. I think it's a great theory as far as it goes. I would say take the global workspace theory and pair it with this realization that the brain also builds models of itself, including it builds models of its own attention. It builds models of its own global workspace. And then you have a complete theory. Because now you have an explanation, not only for why, see, in the global workspace theory, I look at an apple. The theory explains why it is that the apple winning the attentional competition, getting into the global workspace, can then lead to speech circuitry saying, there's an apple, right? But in order to explain how the system says, I have a subjective experience, you got to have some other bundle of information in there. That's where models of self come in, models of the global workspace, models of attention. That's where the explanation lies for how that system asserts that it has conscious experience, right? So you take the global workspace, you add the attention schema theory, you put them together. I mean, they mesh very nicely together, but then you have an explanation for the behavior of the system. But the global workspace theory by itself is a magical theory. It says put things in the magic box, and then experience emerges. And then somehow, because we have experience, without any explanation, that allows us to say that we have it. Like there's a lot of things in the brain that we have that we can't say that we have. Like until science figured it out and people read it in books, nobody knew they had neurons in their brains. It's not like just because you have it in there, then you can verbally say it. Like you can't express something in words unless there's a bundle of information that gets into your cognition that tells you that you have that thing. So when people say, I have conscious experience, what's the bundle of information? Where does that come from? It isn't just, oh, I have experience, therefore I can say I have it. Like that's not an adequate explanation. So essentially, every theory of consciousness out there that I know of, except for AST, with the attention schema theory. Every theory posits if you can explain how the experiential essence arises, then you're done. Because once it arises, then magically we can just say we have it. Right? But that doesn't make any sense. I call it arrow A and arrow B. Arrow A is how the brain produces the experience, if it does. Arrow B is how the experience impacts your speech machinery so you can say you have it. And theories of consciousness ignore arrow B, like as if it doesn't exist, as if they're all done now. They say, oh, the magic emerged. That's it. I'm done with my explanation. Well, how is it that you're walking around saying you have consciousness just because there's a magic essence emerging from your brain? Like, what linked the magic essence to your cognitive machinery that thinks you have it and your speech machinery that says you have it? How do you get there? How do you connect those dots? So this is something that the attention schema theory does. And it plays really well with other theories. And the global workspace theory is one of those theories it plays really well with. You have to put them together, and then you got something.
At this point, we've covered a lot, and I'd like, before we move on, to try to summarize a few of the things we've said, just to make sure that I'm on the same page with them.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back into some of the specifics. So one, whether or not it is like something to be a human or another animal, this depends on whether or not that organism's information processing is sufficiently complicated that it has a self-model producing some sort of fiction of what it's like to be that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is that roughly on the same, roughly right? Okay. And then the second question is whether or not something is capable of suffering. And the answer to that question is, again, it's not all or nothing, but it is whether or not this organism's brain is complicated enough that its self-model involves suffering, and maybe more particularly whether or not it is attentive to its own pain in a certain way. Maybe you want to add more to this one.
I think those are all related, yes.
Okay.
I do think that if you're not attending to it, you're not conscious of it. Mm-hmm. This is something that has been fairly well established. Attention and consciousness almost always move around with each other. And so most of the time, if you're not attending to it, you're not conscious of it. And if you have pain and you're truly paying zero attention to it, then you're not conscious of it. Pain, unfortunately, tends to attract one's attention. Mm-hmm. So attention comes in and models your own rich models of yourself and models of your own attention come in. Yes. And that's what we call consciousness. Yeah.